Hey everyone, and I told you I'd be back once we had a clearer picture of our next storm. Well, the time has come. There's a significant winter storm brewing, and now we have enough data to work with. We can start piecing the forecast together. So let's dive in and break it all down. Whenever we're tracking a storm that's still a week away, the smartest approach is to start with the upper atmosphere. That's where weather patterns begin, and they gradually make their way down to the surface. Pinpointing exactly what's going to happen closer to the ground is tricky this far out. So we're starting at the top, where things are already looking fascinating. Currently, we still have cold air pouring down from Canada into the eastern U.S., but there's going to be a short break in that pattern. Meanwhile, the Santa Ana winds that have been hammering parts of California are about to ease up. This is great news because those offshore winds have been fueling fire risks in the region. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button like this video and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Fast forward to Thursday and Friday, and we'll see a shift in the winds over California. A southwesterly flow will move in, cutting off those dangerous gusts and giving the state a much-needed break. As we shift focus to the rest of the country, there's a buckle in the jet stream that's allowing some warmer air to temporarily push into the central and eastern U.S. It's not a dramatic warm-up, but temperatures will rise slightly above average. This will feel like a relief for many of you dealing with the cold. For those in Chicago, Houston, and the Ohio Valley, this mild spell will arrive over the weekend. The East Coast, including the Northeast, will feel it on Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures will run about 10-15 degrees above normal during this brief break, but don't get too comfortable. It won't last long. By Saturday, a massive Arctic air mass will start pushing south, bringing temperatures far below average to states like Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota. Lows will plunge into the 20s, with wind chills reaching 30 or 40 in some spots. This bitter cold will expand southward, hitting areas like Colorado, the Texas Panhandle, and Oklahoma. It's shaping up to be the coldest air of the season for many of you. Even cities like Houston and Austin will feel the chill early next week. And here's the kicker. This Arctic blast will stick around for several days, bringing extreme cold to much of the country. As for storm activity, we have a clipper system dropping out of Canada that will bring lake effect snow to parts of the Great Lakes. At the same time, a plume of moisture from Mexico will merge with this system, creating widespread precipitation from Friday into Saturday. In Louisiana and Mississippi, expect heavy rain and some thunderstorms. Nothing severe, but notable. Further north, places like Michigan, New York, and New England could see snow. The Southeast will get soaking rains with a chance of flash flooding in parts of Georgia. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Arctic outbreak following this system will set the stage for a major winter storm next week. We're already seeing signals for snow in Texas, Louisiana, and even along the Gulf Coast. Yes, snow could potentially fall in places like Galveston Beach or New Orleans. The models are even hinting at snow over the Gulf of Mexico, which is almost unheard of. When ensemble models average out snow this far south, you know it's a serious possibility. I can't give exact details just yet. We're still a week out. But the chance for wintry weather in the southern states is definitely increasing. Whether it's snow, sleet, or freezing rain, someone down there is likely to see it. Current models show a 20-30 chance of 3 inches or more of snow in parts of Texas and the Carolinas by January 23rd. The Weather Prediction Center is also highlighting potential winter precipitation from Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, and beyond. So here's what's certain. This certain outbreak is happening, and it's going to be intense. What's less certain is how the moisture from the Gulf will interact with the cold air, determining who gets snow, ice, or rain. We'll be refining those details as the storm gets closer. As you may know, we've been keeping a close eye on how far south snow might reach. The snowpack right now is primarily sitting in the northern regions. Yesterday, I point out that while I look at the weather models, they aren't the only thing I base my forecast on. I also pay attention to the overall environmental conditions and current weather patterns to help make more accurate predictions. When the models first showed snow extending really far south, I wasn't too convinced. But now, as we move into the end of the week, we're starting to see the models adjust and align more with my earlier thinking. Yes, we are still looking at the potential for snow in parts of the southern U.S., but it's not going to be as deep or as widespread as what we saw initially. The models have pulled back a bit. By next Friday, over a week from now, we're looking at snow possibly reaching Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, northern Georgia, and parts of the Carolinas. But it's important to note that this is not going to be a snowstorm stretching down into Texas like the models were initially showing. I mentioned this in my previous video that snow was much more likely to stay further north. And now the models are coming around to that idea. But even though we're not looking at a major snow event in the deep south, this is still a significant weather system that we need to keep an eye on. This pattern of snow and colder air pushing further south is something that's going to affect not just the U.S., but areas in the Caribbean as well. So while the snow won't be pushing all the way into Texas, we're still in for some interesting developments in the coming days. Now let's talk about the systems that are setting all of this in motion. We've got two key weather features to keep track of right now. One is coming out of the Pacific, bringing moisture across the southern U.S. and into the Caribbean. The other is coming down from Canada, bringing cold air with it. These two systems are going to combine and form a front that will move through over the weekend. This front will bring rain to many areas with snow on the colder side of the system, especially in the northern parts of the U.S. It's one of those classic setups where rain and snow are on opposite sides of the front, and we'll be tracking where the rain and snow lines set up as the front pushes through. And speaking of cold air, this is a big one. Right now, the coldest air is sitting over Canada. We've got some Arctic air in place, and while it's currently confined to Canada, that cold air is going to start pushing south into the U.S. as we move into early next week. This is going to bring some of the coldest temperatures we've seen so far this winter to parts of the northern and central U.S. However, as I mentioned earlier, the models are now pulling back on how far south this cold air will get. It won't be reaching as far south as some earlier runs were suggesting, but it's still going to bring a noticeable chill to the northern parts of the U.S. So if you're in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, or the Northern Rockies, get ready for a blast of cold air. But for those of us in the southern U.S., it looks like we'll be spared from the worst of it. Switching gears to the Caribbean. This is a region that's going to see a lot of action over the next few days.
Right.
Now we've got a front draped across the northern Caribbean. This front is going to bring some cooler weather to areas like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Bahamas. If you're waking up to some cooler mornings, that's because of this front, and it's going to stay in place for a while. Along with the cooler temperatures, we're also going to see some rain showers, but the totals won't be super high. In fact, most of the Caribbean will experience just light, spotty showers, but it's something we'll need to keep an eye on. By Tuesday, this front is expected to reach the northern Bahamas, Cuba, and parts of the Gulf of Mexico. And as the front continues its march south, we'll see some cooler air moving behind it. This front could bring rain to areas like Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, but it will also bring some drier conditions to the southern Caribbean. And for those of us in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, the chances of rain remain pretty low, around 10 to 20. But if you're in places like Trinidad and Tobago, you could see some more frequent showers with rain chances running about 40 to 50 over the next couple of days. Looking a bit further out, the pattern in the Caribbean is going to stay active. We'll see one system move through, then another one right behind it, creating a nonstop cycle of rain and cold fronts. This kind of weather setup can bring a lot of changes, and we may see some higher rain totals as the fronts move through, especially in places like the northern Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. Now, let's talk seas for a moment, because that's another important factor to keep an eye on. With these fronts moving through, we're going to see an increase in wave heights, especially in the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. This weekend, seas will build as the first front moves through, and by Sunday, we could see wave heights reaching 2 to 3 meters, or about 7 to 9 feet in some spots. So if you're planning to head out on the water, be prepared for rougher conditions, especially as we move into next week. As we get deeper into the weekend and early next week, the pattern doesn't look like it's going to slow down at all. We're tracking two major winter storms. The first one is moving through this weekend, bringing rain and snow to the northern parts of the U.S. And then the second one, which could bring some snow further south, is expected to develop next week. This second system is going to interact with the cold air that's been building in Canada, which means we could see another round of snow and cold pushing down into the northern U.S. This is looking like it could be a pretty active time for winter weather across much of the country. And I'll be tracking all the developments and bringing you the latest updates as they happen. So that's your forecast update for today. There's a lot to watch over the next week, from snow in the southern U.S. to active weather in the Caribbean and higher seas in the Gulf. I'll be back with more updates. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe and stay weather aware.